What's going on, everybody? It is that time again. The AllSooners Podcast, episode 181 on this Tuesday, April 4th, 2023. Josh Callaway in Oklahoma City, Ryan Chapman also in Oklahoma City, John Hoover in Tulsa. Gentlemen, how are we doing?
Man, we're good. We're halfway through spring practice. Softball is in its second season. Basketball season has mercifully ended. We are good.
I was just really disappointed. I spent a lot of time working the phones, working our sourcing network on Saturday, trying to figure out how Journal Booty's going to look as a tight end. But then I looked up and was like, oh, it's the 1st of April. Obviously, that was, I'm not usually a big April Fool's person as far as Twitter goes. Like, I'm like a pranking person. Twitter's dumb. Of all the lame, team account ones, that was probably the best one because the General Booty over to tight end. Yeah.
Nice little play on words. Can confirm Monday we were out at practice. He's not playing tight end.
April Fool's Day. Thumbs down. Hate it.
Just stupid. Stop it.
It's the worst. And
it was funny when we were in second grade. It's not funny anymore.
Well, like Ryan said, it's the worst on Twitter because people just put out everything. There's legitimate. It's crazy. If you guys ever suggest this, I'm gonna shoot it down because there was legitimate news organizations that put up like fake articles. Yeah. That's absurd to me.
There was, I don't want to out anybody, but there was something I check every day during Diamond Sports season that put out this big to-do about the NCAA unveiling a physical transfer portal that players have to travel to that site and walk through it, which on itself is a funny idea, except that's the 3rd year in a row that I've seen an organization run that version of a story. And the Onion did it not on April Fool's. So
who will appreciate, did you guys see the St. Louis Battlehawks in the XFL?
Yes.
Did you see that, Who? They put out a big statement saying that the team was relocating to Los Angeles. And that didn't go over well. Fans were just mad. They knew it was an April Fool's joke, but they were like, this is not funny. Don't joke about that.
Who knew? OU fans and St. Louis Battlehawks fans can commiserate in their one day of anger about going to Los Angeles.
There you go. But yeah, April Fool's Day, don't like it. We got through it. We've moved on. Vibes are high. I think, like Hoof said, the weather is fantastic. It was hot at practice yesterday. Got to wear shorts and short sleeves. It was amazing. Felt like summer.
I had to break out the sun hat.
Yeah, you did. You went Omaha sun hat on us, which was a good call because it was hot and sunny out there. It's pushing 90 yesterday. Good stuff. Good stuff. As the spring game starting to approach, we're kind of at the midway point ish. Spring football right now. A little bit later, we're going to recap basically what we've learned so far, what we look forward to seeing, and I guess how it feels right now through this point in the spring. But we'll get there. Let's recap what we've had in the last week since the last show. We've obviously talked to a bunch more people, a bunch more coaches, and all that good stuff. We were at practice yesterday, like I said, so we're going to recap it all for you. But let's first start with, I think, probably the biggest news of last week for OU fans. Javonte Barnes is out. We were at practice yesterday. We didn't know that before we got there. Hoove and I roll into practice. Ross Lovelace was with us as well. And he's got a big boot on his foot. And he's on a scooter. And he's not practicing, obviously. And not great if you're an Oklahoma fan. Now, we don't know the severity. DeMarco Murray chose not to give us any update yesterday, which is not shocking at all. Assistant coaches have never said anything about injuries underneath Brent Venables. But we're supposed to talk to Brent tomorrow. So we should know more details tomorrow. But without knowing the severity, how big a deal is this in your guys' mind that Javonte Barnes is missing time? And obviously we'll see if he's able to play in the spring game and whatnot, but not a great injury here if you're Oklahoma.
Yeah, at the risk, before we dive too deep into it immediately, at the risk of sounding self-serving, excuse me, did we just get invited to a practice where the starting running back is wheeling himself around with his foot in a wrap, his right foot, and in front of everybody, and everybody's out there taking pictures and putting it on Twitter and writing stories about it? What world are we living in where that stuff is happening? Emeka Megwa was sitting, the other walk-on running back transfer from Washington, sitting on the bench. When you first walk into the field, you walk up the ramp and then you walk into the field. He's sitting right there next to a pair of crutches. I'm like, wow, that's weird. Chapman McCown is walking around, another walk-on running back from Norman, walking around the perimeter of the field while his teammates are going through individual drills, walking right directly 5 feet from us in the media with the cameras. I'm like, what message are they trying to convey here that, we're opening practice and you're seeing everything and transparency is our thing? That, I'm sorry, it hasn't been that way since I've been on the beat since probably 2006, 2005, 2006. Haven't seen that level of transparency. So that's really cool. Now, how bad is Javonte Barnes hurt? No idea. Bad enough that it's spring practice. So if you tweak something, you don't want to push it, right? I don't think he's in danger of losing his job, losing snaps, so to speak. So it appears to be on the visual side, precautionary. DeMarco said the way he answered the question was something like, Javonte, is he okay? And his initial response was, yeah, but I'll let the head coach talk about that. So he didn't seem like overly concerned. And I will say this, they were all dressed in full pads.
Yeah, it's
for
funny.
whatever that's worth. Even the injured guys were out there in full pads hobbling around on their little scooters.
I don't know how he got the pads on. That's the impressive part. How did he get them on?
Well, that's what the first off, you got a lot of soul mission guys that can help out and good teammates. Teammates help teammates. Obviously we kind of have to couch the what does it mean for Barnes conversations, how we can get the update tomorrow from Brent Venables. So I don't think any of us really want to speculate on that just until we get the update. It's not like we're going 24 hours, so we'll know tomorrow. But when you look past that, though, Gavin Sawchuk, a guy who wasn't here last spring and then kind of was on the back burner for most of last year as Oklahoma was, repping Eric Gray, Javonte Barnes, Marcus Major in practice in the fall. So those are the guys that were playing. More reps for him with Megwa out as well. More reps for Caleb Hicks and Dalen Smothers and Marcus Major. And so it's one of those things that as long as everyone's okay, as long as it's not a long-lasting injury, which, again, we'll find that out on Wednesday when we talk to Brent Venables, it could be something that helps the entire running back room come along a little bit faster because those guys are going to be getting more reps. In the spring game, I think those guys are going to get plenty of reps anyway because remember, the easiest thing, the thing we all have to fight is saying, hey, that lower running back on the depth chart is going to look good because that's the person that's going to be given a ton of carries in a spring game. But now we might get to see, depending on how the reps are divvied out and how long Javonte Barnes is out, you might get to see Caleb Hicks, Dalen Smothers, those guys run as the second guys off the bench for Major or Sawchuk, which could be a lot of fun just to see what those guys are up to and how close they are. Because, you remember Caleb Hicks, that's Brent Venables said when he was playing at Denton Ryan, he was the best player on the field every single week. And he's a guy that's looked incredibly comfortable from what I've seen in kind of the practice footage. He looks the part already. It's just a freshman coming in. So I'll be interested to see if that almost kickstart some of the development of those guys behind Javonte Barnes just because they're already on campus and now they're going to get more of those reps in practice.
The Barnes angle, think about this, the winter football, winter workouts, right? And those coaches' stations and all the grinding that they do. That is an absolute meat grinder to have to go through. You put your body through something, especially as a young running back, young player, that you didn't know you were capable of doing physically. All right. Summer, tales are, the stories go, right? The lore is that summer's even harder. All right. So in between, you've got 15 football practices jammed into a little over a month, a little less than a month, actually. Is that right? Yeah, a little less than a month. Started in late April, finishing in started in late March, finishing in late April. So they're at a stage right now where look at the running back room. Who's got the most mileage on their tires, so to speak? Javonte Barnes kind of does, right? Yeah. So I think he carried 120 times last year, something like that. Marcus Major is an upperclassman who hasn't carried the football a lot. The rest of those guys are all young guys. You got a guy who's experienced in Barnes and Sawchuk, right? Then you've got three true freshmen coming in. One's a walk-on, who are looking for playing time, trying to get as many snaps as they can. So I asked DeMarco that question yesterday. Is this kind of a perfect scenario where you've got a lot of young guys who have experience but don't have a lot of tread on the tires, or haven't worn off a lot of tread on the tires. And he said, yeah, it's a great situation. So there's that. The other thing I wanted to mention about the running backs was Jeff Lebby wants to use them in the passing game. The quarterbacks were doing this rollout drill. They had all five quarterbacks. They were doing the same drill where they would take the snap, fake the RPO one way, look over here to the left, take off running, and throw it into the corner of the end zone. The guy catching the football was Marcus Major, and he was making some unbelievable catches. Then they switched it around, switched sides of the field, and what they were doing was they were flexing a running back out to the right. They were bringing him in motion next to the quarterback, and then the running back would flare out, and go depending on what the defense was doing, depending on the coach who was standing there coaching them, which was Jeff Lebby at the time. The quarterback would read where the defense was, the running back would read where the defense was, and would throw it to him. Those guys were making plays on every snap. So I say all that, I'm just kind of dressing up the idea that they're going to try throwing to the running back some this year in games.
That makes sense to Eric Gray. It almost felt like we didn't notice it last year because Eric Gray and Braden Willis, those two guys were on the field for what felt like 100% of the snaps. Right. That it was like, oh yeah, Eric Gray gets the football, whether it's running the ball, passing game, stuff like that. And so I'll be really interested to see. I kind of asked something different to DeMarco that he was talking about. He's looking for a starter. That was his line when he was talking about the running backs. And in my mind, it's like, okay, you've got Javonte Barnes, who's kind of that powerful guy. You've got Sawchuk, who we've seen in space. We don't know a ton about what Smothers and Hicks are going to be at the collegiate level. You see Marcus Major. So it's like, what are you just looking for in your starter when you've got such a varied skill set in that running back room? And he basically was just saying, regardless of what you're doing, he's looking for consistency. And that's kind of I feel like that comes from what Jeff Lebby talked about a lot last year when we were asking about like backup quarterback play and stuff like that, is he's looking for known outcomes. This offense wants to not be predictable in the sense that the opposing defense can line up across where you know what's happening. They want to be predictable in the sense that when Jeff Lebby calls a certain play, he knows this is going to be the outcome of that play. And so as long as those guys continue to do that, got to translate it to not just do it on air, but have to do it, versus opposing defenses when the lights are on, stuff like that. It should give a nice wrinkle, nice dimension to the Oklahoma offense if multiple of those running backs can do all those skill sets, despite the fact that they're all so different.
Yeah. And I want to clarify, of course they're going to throw to the running back. I said that earlier. Of course they're going to. That's what Jeff Lebby's made a history of that. But he was really repping the young guys who haven't had to catch a lot of passes in their high school careers or in their college careers yet. He was repping those young guys, and they were all making like over-the-shoulder catches and really athletic, turn around, real quick balls on you kind of catches. And so it was cool to see that they're practicing that versatility in spring, so it put it to use in the fall.
Yeah, I think the injury to Barnes would be a bigger deal and we don't know the severity of it right now, but just in general, it'd be a bigger deal if it was a different position. The running back room is really deep. I've been really impressed with how Marcus Major looks, but also Sawchuk and then the two young guys. I've talked about that before. Caleb Hicks, that guy is really like him. The few practices we've seen, Dalen Smothers too, but Caleb Hicks has caught my eye a little bit more over these first three practices that we've been able to go to. And so you're a little more able to sustain if he is out an extended period of time, as opposed to if this was maybe Jalil Farouk, with the receiver room or something like that. So we'll see how that develops, but obviously we'll get an update from Brent Venables theoretically tomorrow, and we'll go from there as far as that injury goes. Other injuries, Jaden Davis was out at practice yesterday, out as in not participating, off to the side. Kenai Walker as well was not participating. And then Robert Spears-Jennings was practicing, but he had I don't know if you saw who, he had like a big brace thing on his shoulder. So something to kind of monitor there. Peyton Bowen also back with the team. So there's some people curious about that. He was back out there participating, which is good to see. Other than that, I think just the usual suspects, guys we already knew that Brent Venables announced back at the beginning of spring. Walter Rouse was actually out there doing some light work as well. So Oklahoma getting healthy, relatively speaking. Few guys out right now, but, not horrible at this point in the spring. So like we said, Hoover and I were at practice yesterday. Anything that jumped out to you, Hoove, in particular, yesterday, getting out there? Ryan wasn't able to be there, but Hoove and I were out there along with Ross. Anything that stuck out in particular?
Yeah, I watched the linebackers for quite a while. Got some really cool photos. We'll get those up when we can at AllSooners. But this is not a knock on Ted Roof, okay? It's not. Ted Roof coaches linebackers. But make no mistake, Brent Venables coaches linebackers. Oklahoma might have one of the best linebacker coaching corps in all of college football. They got Brent Venables, okay, and he's out there, hands-on guys, okay,
right,
pointing. I'll tell you some story in here in a minute. They've got Ted Roof, who's back there. He's got his little play sheet, and he looks at it between plays, and he's yelling this, and he's telling them that. They also got James Skowski, All-American linebacker from Clemson, who's basically an analyst or a GA right now. He's in that role. He's helping out. And he's telling, I'm telling you, get your shoulders more vertical, okay? Don't be hunched over like this. And he's not talking about in your stance. He's talking about right before you strike somebody. If you get your shoulders less vertical, okay, get hunched over. I mean, he is into the fine details of where your elbow needs to be before you hit somebody, or before here comes a throw over the middle, your feet should be pointed this direction instead of this direction. It's unbelievable how absolutely what attention to detail they have. And here's an example. Here's a perfect example. They got these little cones out there, right? And I mean, they're like this tall, the little bitty cones, 6 inches, 7 inches cones. Venables is standing next to one. There's a drill going on in front of him. He turns around and looks. He looks down at the cone. He bends over. He picks the cone up and moves it. And I don't think he moved it more than a half an inch in any direction. I'm not sure he moved it either way. I think he just picked it up just to pick it up. He's got this constant stream of perfection going on in his mind. I noticed that, and I'm like, he didn't even do anything with that cone. He just bent over and picked it up and put it right back down where it was. You know what I mean? It's like,
right.
And he was pointing it to a guy. I want you to be right here, right here. And he kept pointing and pointing. I must have taken like 20 photos. He was pointing down at the ground. Come stand right here, right here. Like you do with your dog when you're doing your dog training. Here, right, heel, right here. And then he bends over and picks up the cone and puts it down. I'm like, he's got something going on where he's trying to impart to these guys details to the finest point absolutely matter.
Yeah, and wasn't at practice, but was there for the post-practice interviews and talked to Deshaun McCullough. I have a big story that we ran this morning on AllSooners that's already up there. But that's one of the things he talked about is that when Brent Venables is coaching you and he has that attention to detail, it really relays, you have to be on top of every single little thing in this defense. And I think that's been an adjustment for some of the guys. Mm-hmm. Like you think back to last year, the big kerfuffle that was made about Danny Stutzman going on the podcast on the Prairie and talking about Brent Venables yelling at him for you're taking one too many steps or less steps or whatever. And I think that as Stutzman's gotten more serious about Venables' defense, and I think that you saw that's why he kept getting better and better as the year went on last year, because he was on top of those little things. And so now imagine Stutzman, who we know is a big personality, right? But all we've seen of him is he's the vocal leader of that defense. I can't imagine what shift, or I'm curious to see, what kind of shift maybe in the meeting room and the film room is going to come from the guy that personality-wise could be considered, the jokester, but he's the one going, no. We have to follow all these details. Look what it did for my play. Because it seems like the newcomers really understand that they're trying to absorb every single thing that's being imparted on them, because it's a lot of fine-tuning and fine-tuning and talk about those little details, because the details of what got Oklahoma beat a ton last year. When you lose a bunch of close games, guess what? That's not talent gap. That's details and fine margins. And it'll be interesting to see if that sinks in and translates to Saturdays, or if that's just something that the team is still trying to grasp as we head into October and November.
Yeah, something that stuck out to me at practice yesterday, and not that we didn't already know it, but Miguel Chavis is a lunatic in a good way. It was great. I was over there kind of in that same area with the linebackers, and I'm watching the linebackers as well. but then my attention is called to the DNs, which are down in that corner, because he is basically screaming at his guys to. The way they were doing this drill was basically Miguel Chavis had this big medicine ball type thing, and guys would hit it, then knock Chavis back, and then go and like hit one of their other guys who was like waiting just to be hit, basically. And he didn't feel like they were hitting hard enough, and he was screaming at them, "Decide who you want to be!" Like he's yelling at them that they need to hit harder. And the next guy goes, I can't remember who it is. I think it might be Reggie Grimes. I'm not sure. It doesn't really matter. And he does it, and then he comes over to hit his guy. And as he's getting ready to hit his guy, Miguel Chavis screams at him, "Stick his ass!" He yells it, just screams. It just totally. I was like in a trance for like 2 solid minutes just watching because he was just a cartoon character. He's Miguel Chavis is a pleasure. He is a lot of fun, and he was great last week. We talked to him last Wednesday.
Yeah.
And he gave the quote of the week probably when he said PJ Adebawore is longer than a Monday afternoon.
Yeah.
Which is very true. His arms go down to the ground, basically, it feels like. And he just he has a way about him that you can tell why players would like. It's obvious why players would like to play for him. Even just yesterday, I don't know who you saw because it was at the same time as DeMarco, but I'm over there talking to Trace Ford, and Miguel Chavis sneaks up from behind Trace Ford while we're talking to him, doing the media scrum, and he comes around the side and he grabs the mic of Chris Williams with News 9 and like holds the mic up to Trace Ford and asks him like a couple of questions, basically Danny Stutzman style. Asks him like, "Who's better looking, your position coach or you?" Like random stuff like that. He's a goofball, but he's a fun coach and somebody who feels like I mean, not that we didn't necessarily already know, but seeing him actually out there for longer periods of time, it's clear that he's an intense coach. He's a fun coach, but the players really respond to him. So excited for that group this year as well.
He's a treasure. You know, who you don't hear from much on at practice, coach wise. Even standing next to the drill, you don't hear much from Todd Bates.
Yeah,
he coaches quiet, reserved, very methodical, which is funny because his guys are right next to Davis, and it's like they're the D tackles are looking over there at the DNs going, golly, the DNs are over there looking at the tackles going, oof. So it's just interesting, the dichotomy there.
Especially because we know that they're so close, right? What did they said they called them salt and pepper at Clemson because they were like this, and it's just interesting to see the balance of that stuff because like there is no balance in the linebacker room. Venables will get after you like a psycho in the good way. Ted Roof will get after you like a psycho in the good way. Kwiatkowski will get after you like a psycho in the good way. Valai's all over the place. Maybe Brandon Hall and DeMarco Murray. Those are the only other two coaches that are just kind of like quiet, unassuming, doing all their coaching, absolutely. But they're the ones that maybe you don't hear in the background of the videos that Josh has posted.
Also, one last practice thing. I think Jackson Arnold's definitely looking more comfortable. I said that after the first practice that he kind of missed some throws. He kind of looked like a guy at his first spring practice. He kind of was a little high and wide a few times. That's not really happening anymore. And they're not doing anything crazy out there. But when he's doing those rollouts, I mean, I watched like 5, 6, 7 reps or so. They were all money. I mean, right on the dot basically every time. So he's looking more and more like the guy that we know he is. So that's a small thing. But that as well. He's looking more and more sharp each time we're out there. What about the interview part of it? Anything that stuck out from yesterday? Last Wednesday, like I said, Miguel Chavis was great. We got a bunch of players last Wednesday as well, and several more yesterday, along with DeMarco Murray, who we referenced earlier. Any one or two thing that jumped out that you guys wanted to touch on?
Tyler Guyton seems to have an affection for Walter Rouse, the tight end. I'm sorry, the transfers, right? They're both transfer tackles. Guyton last year and Walter Rouse from Stanford this year. He said, "That's my guy right there." He said, he's out there. He's the only one out there working. He pointed and he said, look at him. Look at him. We all stopped the interview basically and had to turn around and look. It was interesting. He's really engaged in that, bringing him in and making sure Walter Rouse is a part of the culture there at OU.
Yeah, that was interesting. We talked a lot about DeMarco. I thought Dasan McCall was really engaging. I spent a lot of my time with him, like I said, and part of that piece up there too is the group of guys that are kind of helping him along, and he mentioned, Danny Stutzman and Jaron Kanik, but also Justin Harrington. And he kind of came from a spot of Justin Harrington and I are similar body types. And Harrington's been able to say, hey, I know you didn't really do the coverage side of things in Indiana. So here are some of the tricks to the trade for grasping the coverage and stuff like that. And I also got to talk to Dasan a little bit about what info is he passing along to his brother, who is going to be linking up in the summer to play, we would assume, safety at Oklahoma. So that's about AllSooners.com as well. I was just really impressed by Dasan. And after him and I were done, I was asking him, he has that, linebacker club beanie. I don't know if anyone's seen it. And I was asking him, is that like an NIL thing? Is it something he found? He was over there on my phone with me, sifting through Instagram for like 5 minutes, trying to find like the exact person that had it. And so, like, he was just a really engaging guy. Yeah. And it was just funny because like the OU media team saw he was like sifting through my phone. They're like coming over, like, what's happening here? They're like, oh, he's trying to help Ryan find something that was asked. He seems like a really engaging, happy guy. Justin Harrington talked about he's one of those guys that's never met a stranger or anything like that. So I think Oklahoma fans will be really excited. As we've heard from some of the other players that he's very talented. He's still getting up to speed mentally in the defense. He talked a ton about that. But I think he's kind of primed to be maybe a face of that defense here in the next couple of years as he mentally catches up to what this defense is. Obviously, physically, he is just built different, and he's a really engaging personality. I think that Oklahoma fans are going to be very familiar with Dasan McCullough and really enjoy what he's going to bring to the table while he's in Norman.
Yeah, Justin Harrington, you referenced him there. I asked him kind of just about his comfort level relative to spring last year, and he was like, "Oh yeah, much further along." He's a guy who's very at peace with kind of everything. Like it's his last season. He knows that. He's kind of roll with the punches. He feels good about everything. Going to take whatever role he gets and make the most of it. He's a very even keel guy, so it's kind of cool to hear him. I didn't get to talk to Trace Ford at all at the February media day. So yesterday was my first chance getting to talk to him a little bit. He is great. He was very good yesterday. And I kind of asked him just about, do you feel like, that you're like an Oklahoma player? Like, I'm sure it was weird for a while, and he acknowledged it was very odd for a while. He's like, but I'm settled in now. It doesn't feel weird at all anymore. It feels like I've slipped right in. I'm right at home, all that good stuff. So that's good to hear if you're an Oklahoma fan, because he's going to be a guy that, a lot is expected of, certainly this year. The one last thing for me, last week, talking to LV Bunkley Shelton, who I don't think we'd ever talked to before, caught up with him for a few minutes, and it was interesting because he chose not to. I can't remember who asked him about last season. He chose not to talk about it. He is like, I don't really want to talk about last season. Basically, it's like clearly not thrilled with the fact that he didn't really ever play. But then he talked about how close he is with J.J. Hester and how happy he is that Angelo Anthony's around, and kind of just that feels like kind of the holy trinity right there of those three guys. Like, probably only one of them is going to have a big role, if any of them. Those three dudes. And they're all close, apparently, and they all have to compete for it. And that's kind of like a little interesting thing there. It's like Oklahoma needs like one of those guys to step up, but probably really aren't going to have much of use for more than one. Because you have Farouk and Stoops, Gibson, Anderson, Gavin Freeman fits in there. But the one of those three could kind of step up, that'd be huge. So like, it's kind of a little transfer competition of those three of like, who's going to be the guy there? Kind of interesting.
Leave it to Hoove to ask the jerk question in the group, right? I asked Tyler Guyton. About because I've been wondering about it ever since last year when TCU got up to almost won the Big 12 and goes to the college football playoff, is the Big 12's first competitor in the national championship game. I've been wondering about it. And I couldn't remember if we asked him in December. I don't think we got to him. We weren't able to have the availability with him. So I asked him, I said, was last year watching TCU from afar, knowing you were there the year before as a starter almost, he would have been a rotational type player. Last year he would have been a starter. Was it bittersweet? And he said, yeah, it was absolutely bittersweet. He said, but I love my team. I love my guys. Those are my guys. I root for them. I pull for them. He looked at my camera and he said, I love y'all. He was talking about he went to the game. He went to the national championship game and rooted on TCU. So that was just really cool. He got a chance to kind of express what TCU and his teammates meant to him and what that time meant to him. So in the end, I'm glad I asked that question because I don't think he had actually gotten a chance to talk about it before publicly.
Kind of the weird world of college sports that we're in now, right? That you've got it's not just former teams, but other guys that you were on a team with last year. If you transferred, other people may have transferred, and so now it's like this weird web that we've become so used to in the coaching world, right? Of I worked on staff with this guy and this guy. It feels like that with all the players now that they've all got this mini network into a bunch of programs from. If they're a transfer, their old program, their old teammate, like there might be 2 or 3 degrees of, I'm keeping tabs on 4 different teams this year just because I like the guys that are there. So it's kind of an interesting window into how those relationships are kind of transforming, and maybe is why we should cherish when you have very chippy rivalry games because everyone else is so kind of buddy and copacetic because everybody's been around the block a little bit.
It reminds me the proliferation of these 7-on-7s that we go cover in the summer, which are coming up, by the way. We're going to have to get busy and start covering some of these. These guys all play together. And it reminds me of the AAU basketball circuit where you're on this team and that dude's over here. He's from this city and he's from Houston and he's from Dallas and they're all coming together. And then the following month, they're all on a different team or there's different teammates on, and they all know each other. And by the time they get to college, it's like, oh yeah, I played AAU with him. Well, now it's happening with 7-on-7 in football. Same thing. So that's another element of this that these guys and social media and recruiting, as big as recruiting is right now, these guys are all like best friends before they ever actually meet each other.
Yeah, if that's not motivation for Tyler Guyton, I don't know what is. The fact that he, like who said he said he went to the game. He sat front row and watched. He's supporting them, but I'm sure they'll stick with you a little. I mean, you were just there and you leave when they win the title, or not win the title, but play in the title game. Didn't come close to winning.
I was going to say, I wasn't over there because I was with McCullough while he was going. Was there a follow-up of thoughts on Georgia and how you have to block guys like that if you want to win a national title?
You're going to be playing against Georgia possibly in a couple of years.
Yeah.
Jeez, what were your thoughts on that massacre?
Yeah.
But yeah, and I love, we talked about a second ago, but I love the Walter Rouse was so funny because he was just like, Walter Rouse was like one of the only guys still on the field. We're in the big stadiums where they were. And so we're out on the actual Owen Field, and Walter Rouse is out there by himself doing some stuff. And Tyler Guyton's just like, look at him. Seriously, look at him. And he's like looking at everybody like, no, look at him. Like it was fun. It was like a father with a son, like, look at my kid, look at him. He's making me so proud. It was just really funny because it was like the Paul Rudd meme almost. Like, look at us. Who'd have thought?
Well, especially because like Rouse is a fifth-year senior, so it's not like a young guy out there.
It was just really, the way he said it was really funny. They clearly have a nice little chemistry there, and we'll see. That's presumably Oklahoma's 2 starting tackles, so good to see if you're an Oklahoma fan. All right, we're going to take a timeout. Like I said, halfway point of spring ball essentially here. What have we learned so far? What are the best positions, things like that? We'll dive into that next as well as recap Pro Day, which was last week in Norman. We got to see all the guys. Ryan and I were both there. We talked to a bunch of dudes as well. What stuck out? Who won Pro Day? We'll talk about that next as well right here on the AllSooners Podcast. On Twitter, you can follow AllSooners at @all_Sooners. Ryan's at _Ryan Chapman. Who's at John E. Hoover. I'm at Josh M. Callaway. Our website is allsooners.com. We are a Fan Nation affiliate, part of the Sports Illustrated Network. Lots of good stuff on allsooners.com right now. Spring football in full swing. Last few weeks, we've had tons from it, tons more to come. Leading up to the start of the spring game, also some great recruiting stuff on there, courtesy of our own John Hoover, who caught up with 2025 QB commit Kevin Sperry a couple weeks ago. He was up playing 7-on-7 in Tulsa. Great interview with him and his family. Hoove, you want to plug that a little bit? Lots to like there if you're an OU fan trying to learn about Mr. Sperry, the future quarterback at Oklahoma.
Yeah, when you get a quarterback commit 2 years ahead of his class arrival, you're going to see a lot of writing. You're going to see a lot of exploration of who this young man is. And I think this story that I posted yesterday tells kind of a complete story of why he chose OU. You keep hearing these recruits say, oh, yeah, it was about the fit, and it was about the coaches being authentic, and it was about my relationships and all that stuff. His was about my parents were overcome with emotion when I was taking a visit to campus. One was last June. The other one was last July. So 2 parents, 2 months, 2 visits. Both of them broke down in tears on their visits. And his dad was explaining, how he felt, what kind of overcame him, made him feel like, oh boy, Oklahoma feels like the place. He wasn't pushing Kevin Jr. to Oklahoma, but he was telling me, this just feels like the place. This feels like it. And so this was again last summer when he was in between his freshman year of high school and his sophomore year of high school. So still a long way to go. I asked him, I said, listen, OU fans right now are nervous. Can we keep a quarterback? They're asking, can we keep a quarterback for 2 years committed?
Right.
And his response is, yeah, they can keep me. I'm in. I'm all in. I'm 100% locked in, and here's why. And he explained it. It's really, really telling how important it was emotionally for his dad and his mom. Different reasons, totally different reasons. Again, different meetings, different people that they were talking to, but the same feeling that they had. And the best part, of course, I've told this part before, he was taking an unofficial visit to spring practice at Texas. He was on the field with the coaching staff watching the Longhorns practice when his phone rang. He looks at the phone and says, Jeff Lebby. How cool is that? He answers the phone. Hey, coach. Hey, just wanted to let you know if you're still interested in Oklahoma, we got a scholarship offer for you. While he's on the 40 acres, while he's at Texas on the visit, he hangs up the phone. They get in the car. They start driving back, and his dad's like, what's up? Why are you smiling so much? And he says, I got an offer from OU. And he says, he said he didn't know how to process it, his feelings. But he gets home, talks to his mom, tells his mom, I'm going to commit to OU. The day that he got the call, which is incredible. So while he was at Texas. So I thought that was a hilarious part. There's some more details in the story that you guys need to log on to AllSooners and check it out. It's a really fun story.
Good insight into, we always wonder, like, what is the recruiting pitch actually like, right? Because you see all the social media stuff, and we hear the talking points in press conferences, and so really good insight too there in Hoove's story about, oh, this is why there is such a huge response to Brent Venables, the recruiter, and it kind of gives you a window in a guy who, offensive guy, right? You shouldn't be the, oh my gosh, the Brent Venables, but it's what he's set up in the entire program. So I would really encourage you, if you're curious what that looks like and why Oklahoma stacked a really nice class last year and why they're already ahead of the game in 2025, who's got it?
Absolutely. I choose to believe that Jeff Lebby did that on purpose. He somehow knew he was there and was like, 100%. I'm going to, he had his own tracked or something. And he was like, I'm going to do this while he's there. It's just a power move. Just for people like us to talk about it, which we are. Good stuff. And recommend you check that out, AllSooners.com. Kid is really good. Obviously, so it's down the road a little bit, but there's a chance that guy is a star at Oklahoma in the future. And you can say that you were in on him early because of Hoove and AllSooners.com. So be the smartest guy at the water cooler tomorrow with other OU fans. All right, like I said, spring football is about halfway through, give or take. A little less than halfway in terms of days. But it's essentially 2.5 weeks in, 2.5 weeks to go until the spring game, which is coming up rapidly on April 22nd. Kyler Murray statue, all that good stuff. Going to be a heck of a day in Norman. We're going to be there all day. It's going to be a circus. Hopefully the weather is as good as it's been this week for that fateful day. What have we learned so far? What's been the big takeaway? Whether that's a position of strength, a position that's a question mark for you, an individual player who you're in on, anything. What's been the number one thing that sticks out in your mind when you think of spring football so far? And is there anything that you want to learn over the last couple of weeks here?
I'm going to take the low-hanging fruit. The position that I've been most impressed with is the linebackers have come a long way, or seem to have come a long way. We don't see them in games. They're not out there trying to tackle Kansas State running backs or Iowa State quarterbacks or anything like that, right? That's later. We'll figure that out later. But right now, the linebackers look like the most improved position. The best position to me looks like the defensive backs. Those guys, I was watching real close yesterday. Reggie Pearson, for instance, took a wrong step and realized in the moment, it was a drop drill. They were dropping in coverage, and then you break on the ball wherever the quarterback's shoulders lean a certain way, he breaks in that direction, and then the coach throws the ball and he reaches up and catches it. While he was in the break, he realized he had taken a wrong step and he started kind of admonishing himself. But then, and then the coach throws the ball and is yelling at him while the ball's in the air, and he makes this tiptoe grab with one hand to catch. Okay, snags the ball out of the air, jogs right in front of me, and goes, "Yeah, but that was a sweet catch, though, coach."
That's great.
I mean, he knew. He was like, "Oh man, what are you doing? Come on!" And then he caught the ball. He's like, "Oh yeah, but coach, that was a sweet catch." So just the confidence and the experience level that's there at that position, at the safety position. I was watching the corners as well. Jay Belai was going through some real fundamental, basic stuff with them. How to turn, where to put your shoulders, how to drop your foot so you don't trip over yourself. And a couple of guys were still tripping over themselves, the walk-ons and the freshmen and stuff like that. And they would yell at them and say, no, do it like this. And the upperclassmen would get in there and do it perfectly. And the DBs look good, the linebackers look improved, and the wide receivers look very thin. And I don't mean skinny. I mean very young, very green, very inexperienced. They've got a lot of growing up to do in the wide receiver crew.
I agree.
Yeah, not really a position thing for me, but this is like a blanket statement, especially for the defense. And we kind of alluded to it earlier, but it really feels like last year and this offseason, the coaching staff has found a way to hammer home. Like the players are now repeating the talking points. It's not the Brent Venables is the best defensive coordinator, which you still hear. It's these minute details are what needs to happen if you want to play elite defense, because that's a storyline that followed the entire Lincoln Riley era, right? Is that the team was undisciplined in terms of penalties, things like that. But what did they have? They had a Heisman Trophy quarterback that could kind of paper over those cracks. Last year, you don't have Caleb Williams running the offense, and that meant that all of those little holes and things like that mounted up to a bunch of losses, right? And so it feels like that is something that's truly seeped through. Like I said earlier, we're not going to know if that has sparked improvement till they get on the field, because that's not really something we can measure in practice viewings or at a spring game even. But that seems just like a positive step that breakthrough appears to have happened, because, I mean, top to bottom, it's details. It's all the coaches you hear detail oriented, and the players are kind of reciprocating that, which I think is a good thing. On the flip side, John, you mentioned not just the receivers look thin. Like I have had questions about Austin Stogner coming in and being like a dominant force at tight end anyway, just because he is a guy that has an injury history that his production hasn't quite matched on the back end of that from what it was before that. And then you've got, I mean, Josh, you talked about this last week, I think. Helms is injured in spring. Llewellyn's injured in spring. I don't think that Blake Smith came over from A&M with the expectation of playing like a massive role. I know he'd love to do that, but I don't think that was like the expectation. You're flipping like one defensive lineman over in Bray to just take some snaps to get these tight end room through spring. That's a big question mark for me. And I wouldn't be shocked if they don't go out and try to find somebody in that late portal window after spring football just to say you need another body in case one of the physical recovery tracks doesn't go as planned. That to me looks like a position that, hey, the wide receivers might have to develop, because I'm not sure that this is like nailed on that you're going to have a tight end on the field every single play this season if the room is that thin.
Good insight. I will add this. Caden Helms was walking off the field yesterday, full uniform, had his helmet on. Okay. His hair was all messed up and sweaty. And what that tells you is he's out there doing some work. Don't know what extent. I'm sure he's not full speed, but at some point, you work him back onto the field. That's kind of what I saw yesterday. We didn't see him practice. I didn't see him practice, but at the same time, I saw him coming off the practice field with his teammates and his guys in his position room. Ryan, I think you're spot on about Stogner. If he's healthy, I might make like a bold prediction at some point as we get closer to the season. He'll catch 60 passes if he's healthy.
Yeah, no, I'm glad Ryan brought that up, because I think Stogner is going to be really good. I do think that the comfort level for him and the connection with Jeff Labby, I think there's Joe John Finley is what I meant to say. I think there's a lot of reasons to be optimistic there, but you're right, Ryan. I mean, the room is super thin right now. I mean, when they're doing the drills after him, it's like, okay, who is this? Okay, this is a D lineman catching passes now. Okay, this is a basketball player catching passes. Like it's it's a hodgepodge thrown together room, and a big part of that obviously is Helms and Noel and both being banged up. But yeah, big question mark right now. That's a good point. On the
And to
good
his
side for
credit,
me,
Josh, to his credit, Joe John Finley, relentlessly positive
oh
about,
yeah,
hey, Hayden Bray is out here helping us and he's catching passes. He's doing stuff he hasn't done in college. We love him for it. Basketball player from Cameron University, Division II. He's out here. I'm telling him he could be the next Antonio Gates. It's saying a
I
mouthful, but
appreciate it.
Joe John, he's approaching this with the ultimate positivity. So that's got to be good.
Yeah, because if I were in his position, I would just every time Stogner turns, I'd be like, Austin, you're the only guy. Like you have to stay healthy. It reminds me of the Kennedy Brooks, Eric Gray situation 2 springs ago, where you're sitting here and you're just like, if they're healthy, you're not worried at all. And that's the thing. Like if Stogner's healthy, you're not worried at all. But that's a big if to carry through in a very violent game.
Yeah, no, 100%. As far as like the positive side to me, I definitely, like we said it earlier, the running back room, I'm a big fan of it right now. I think Hicks and Smothers have both looked really good for young guys, especially Hicks. Marcus Major looks to be in phenomenal shape. Don't know what he's going to be. He's always had something keeping him from being a guy, but he looks great right now. We'll see how that goes. And then obviously you mix Barnes and Sawchuk in there, and there's depth there, a lot of depth, most in a while. And then Tobby Walker, who's, again, just a bowling ball human. When they did that W drill last week at practice, he was trucking dudes everywhere. So he's an option if you need him. He's an option. He's there. So they got lots of guys there. And then, what's that?
MVP of the spring game last year.
That's right. He ran people over in the spring game last year. So this is his time. This is his time to shine. And then to loop into Who's point earlier with the defensive backs, I agree completely, but even more specifically, the safeties to me. There's so many guys. I'm a huge fan of Reggie Pearson. Robert Spears-Jennings is a guy who's coming along. Peyton Bowen looks the part as a 5-star kid. Key Lawrence, Billy Bowman. I mean, they got just guys on guys that are options back there. So I think that Brandon Hall's unit is really good. Lots of options back there.
With safety, the question is, how can you keep that guy off the field?
Right? Yeah, they have like 5 of those. Yeah,
they've got 5 of those dudes where it's like, well, he has to play. Well, they've only got 2 positions plus the nickel, and we all know the nickel is kind of amorphous between the cheetah and the nickel. So I don't know. You talking about your best 11 players? You may have to line some safeties up at the end or something sometimes.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, they do. It's a good problem, obviously, but they have lots of options. And then one last little tiny thing for me. The 5-star we talked about at the beginning of spring, what we were excited to see. The 5-star guys all look the part to me. Peyton Bowen looks great. Jackson Arnold, like we just said earlier, getting more and more comfortable as he goes. And then PJ Adebawore, like Miguel Chavis said, longer than a Monday afternoon. I mean, he looks different than everybody else out there. And I don't know how that's going to translate on the field, but I feel very confident saying that at some point, whether it's this year, next year, 2 years, I don't know, he's going to be a big time problem for other teams because he just has a natural frame and everything that's just not normal. So those 3 5-star guys all look the part to me, which is good to hear.
I agree. Imagine PJ with on the roster at 275 pounds.
Right.
Wow.
Disgusting. This is horrifying. It's terrifying.
Michael Myers.
So yeah, about halfway through spring ball, second half coming up on the way, and like we said, we'll be back out there tomorrow talking to Brent Venables and a few more players and whatnot. We haven't heard from the only assistant coach we haven't had yet are Bill Bedenbaugh and Todd Bates. So the expectation is that we'll get both of them over the next couple of times out or so. Get Venables again.
Venables tomorrow.
Yep, Brent Venables tomorrow. And so keep up with AllSooners.com and, of course, to his YouTube page for all the latest from spring camp. Shifting over to Pro Day recap. Last week we were there, Ryan and I, along with Ross, were at Everest for Pro Day. All 32 teams were scheduled to be there. I assume they were all there. It seemed like most of them, if it was a pretty high number, if not all of them. We're on hand to watch all the OU guys do their thing. Who you were keeping tabs from afar? Ryan, obviously you were there with me. Well, what was the what's the right word? The gauge, I guess, that you got on how guys did. Whether it's one guy who really stuck out in a good way, bad way. winners and losers from Pro Day last week.
Oh man, Ryan, you were there. You want to go first?
Yeah, I thought that Anton Harrison carried himself like a guy who was very confident of his draft position and who knew I need to do 1 or 2 small drills as opposed to going through the entire thing. So I think that that's a really good sign for Anton. Deshaun White, obviously, was going to be a big day for him. Him and Chris Murray were the two going through it that were the guys not invited to the combine. And I thought Deshaun White, and he talked about this after, that first 40 he lined up for, it took him what felt like in the moment 30 seconds to get everything set. And you could tell he was going through all of his, I need to line my hand up with my back knee. I need to place it here. That, like, you could just tell that he was almost, from my perspective, overthinking that first 40. And then he talked about that he had felt those nerves. And then when he ran the 40 toward us, then he goes back to what is essentially one of the end zones at Everest, and Key Lawrence was back there. One of the guys that was just like, settle down, simmer down, and that Deshaun steadied in after that. And I thought that he looked good after that. Not that that 40 was bad. You could just tell that there were some nerves there. So I thought that was really interesting. Eric Gray didn't do a lot, which I think kind of shows teams want him to run a 40, but he didn't roll back through there or anything like that. So I thought that was just a status quo thing for him. And it sounds like that on the other side of it, Braden Willis had a slight hamstring pull, I think is what he had said, like some tightness, which just meant that he didn't get to like run a 40 or things like that. And he was a guy that felt like could have improved on some of those stuff as far as, you know, the testing numbers and all that. And I think it was just a little unfortunate for him that he was going through some stuff, but if he felt that tightness, he obviously wasn't feeling 100%. And I just thought
it was in his calf.
Yeah, it was a disc calf.
I think, if I remember.
Yeah, I think that's just a little unfortunate for him because he's one of those guys that when they go through the blocking drills and stuff like that, you can tell, like all the scouts will put out, you can tell what guys actually were asked to block in college and what guys just had to learn how to do it for the drills and stuff. And Willis is one of those guys that actually can do it. And so I thought that I don't know if that's a negative. It's just it's an injury. It happens, but it feels like Braden Willis had just an unfortunate situation where he really could have maybe improved on some of his combine stuff, and I'm not sure he got the chance to do that with some injury, minor injury concerns.
Yeah, Braden's one of those guys that's the combine didn't help him, and his pro day didn't help him. But every time he's up on somebody's board, and he's going to be on all 32 boards because he's just a flat out football player. Every time he comes up on their board, they're going to remember back in their mind all the tapes that they watched of him kicking somebody's backside, right? They're going to all the dominating individual blocks he did. He was the leading, most highest graded blocker on the team in 2020. Regular, everyday, got a lot of snaps kind of player. He posted the best Pro Football Focus grade, and I think among tight ends nationally, his run blocking grade was second in the nation. So among tight ends, that just tells you right there, he's an absolute football player. Coaches love him. He's a leader. He's a spokesman. He can be a face of the program type player. He just got all these qualities that you want. Hardest worker, first in, last out kind of guy. He's got this reputation, and every coach is going to have his back whenever the NFL calls. Something else I noticed is not the timing stuff, the cone drills or any of that, but just the position drills. Eric Gray looks like $1 million running back in the position drills. When he's asked to flare out or read a safety or make a break or cut across the middle or come back to the football, whatever it is, in the passing game, especially in the passing game, he is gifted. He is just has a sense about him. It reminds me of DeMarco Murray, how he just knew more about the game of football than the people he was playing with. And there's an instinct that Eric Gray has that reminds me of DeMarco Murray.
Makes sense. There was always those two always had a connection there. Clearly very close. And I actually asked Eric at Pro Day about DeMarco, just helping prepare him for this whole process. I was like, you had a guy who played in the NFL for a long time as your coach, and he basically said, look, I came to OU because DeMarco Murray. I wouldn't be here without him, all that stuff. So that makes sense. That tracks. I don't really have anybody that I hate to say, I guess, but I don't have anybody that I think really was a big obvious winner of pro day. Nobody really stood out big time. I do think that if I had to pick one, honestly, I might say CJ Colden. He did some things to impress. Some of his drills and cone work and his 15, 5, 10, 15 or whatever it is would have marked like in the top 5, top 10 at the combine for cornerbacks. So I don't know if he's going to have a shot to get drafted. Probably not, but he may have done enough for somebody to throw him a undrafted free agent contract that maybe otherwise wouldn't have. And then we'll see what happens from there. So I thought he did as good as could be hoped at the pro day last week. On the flip side, and I'm not an NFL scout by any means, but it really felt like Jeffrey Johnson didn't have a great day. He was very slow on everything. Ryan, did you get that same feel? Like it felt like he didn't do a lot to help himself.
Yeah, it felt like him, and it felt like Chris Murray both. I know that for like linemen, the entire 40 is not what's judging you, but it's like that first 10. But like those guys were the ones that consistently looked like they were pushing so hard that there was a moment that I felt like Chris Murray was almost going to like fall over after the finish line. And like Jeffrey Johnson was he wasn't needing, we have to make like a lane for them to run through so they can finish their 40 and have plenty of time. And it's basically like a blow off lane. And Jeffrey Johnson wasn't even going where he needed to utilize that. He was able to peel off. And I was just like,
yeah,
that's it. It just didn't look like all the other 40s that were being run by everybody else, if that makes sense.
100%. So
speaking of 40s, we all know Wanya Morris hurt his hamstring at the combine. He was not able to participate in the pro day. So he has scheduled his own Wanya Morris pro day for April 11th in Norman. I think it's in Norman. So
yeah, I'm not sure. I presume.
But he was there.
His own pro day. He was there.
Yep.
Yeah, he was there. I also think Marvin Mims just continued to help himself. I think there's a chance that, and again, I'm not an NFL draft expert by any means, but I feel like Marvin Mims has got a shot to maybe go as high as like the second round, depending on how things go. He seems to have a lot of positive momentum right now. And he was out there. Obviously, the big question with him after last year, didn't drop any passes. And you're inside, it's Everest. You have Lossman just throwing you balls with no defense, but no drops. He caught punts for teams as well out there. Didn't drop any of those. So I think all in all, I think Marvin Mims has helped himself, and he's got a chance. I think he's pretty in good shape for day 2 and maybe second round. So we'll see how that goes.
Did you see this? I guess he's a special teams coach working with Marvin Mims on the punt returns, like during the drill session.
I don't remember.
Like the guy, he would go up and he would stand right next to Marvin, and they would be like looking up at the ceiling, and he's pointing and he's moving over here, and then he points over here, and then he's gesturing and making all these motions, and I'm like, huh. That's not something. I'm sorry, it's just not something you see every day. Most times, it's punt return coaches out there going, catch the football. He's not giving like pointers on angles and where the ball's drifting to. It was unique. It was different.
Yeah, I think that might have been going on. The receivers were the last group to go, which meant that Josh and I were over there doing a bunch of interviews and stuff, kind of as the first people. So I don't remember seeing Marvin working with the special teams guys. So I think though that was because Marvin was like the last guy we got. He rolled up in his Cinnamon Toast Crunch Crocs. Was very proud of those and ready to rock and roll.
The first thing. Didn't he say like the first thing he was going to buy was more Crocs with his NFL deal or whatever? Because he said somebody asked him,
Powerball winner right here. That's the same thing I'm going to buy is more Crocs.
Right.
That's all.
Somebody asked him something along the lines of like, what was something that NFL scouts asked you? And he's like, a lot of them wanted to know what the first thing I was going to buy was. And then somebody asked like, well, what is it? And he was like, probably get some more Crocs.
These ones are getting rank.
Yeah, that was a funny Marvin.
I did see and I don't know honestly who put it out. You see these things on Twitter and social media every day, but I saw a top 10 receivers in the NFL draft. Top 10, Marvin Mims was not on that list, and I was like, we all know Marvin, how productive he can be, how explosive he can be, and I was like, 10? You don't have him in the top 10? I find that hard to believe. The other guys on the list were really good. Trust me, I vote on the Biletnikoff Award every year, and it was hard this year. There was a lot of really good, talented, explosive, dynamic, productive wide receivers. Marvin Mims, I think he's among that group. He just hasn't had a chance to really showcase it yet. So we'll see what kind of pro he is.
I take him on the Falcons in a heartbeat. Go ahead and they need a receiver. Good value.
Rams need him.
Pay attention. Pay attention. We also
Raiders are in the tank, so you guys Marvin Mims can help people win games. That's not what I'm looking for. So you guys can have him.
we also got some insight into the USFL draft process. Remember how Deshaun White got drafted in the USFL, and we're all like, "What the hell is this?" Basically, his reaction was very similar. He said he like got out of a workout and like got called like, "You've been drafted by the USFL," and he didn't. He's like, "I didn't even know I was in the pool to be drafted by the USFL." So that filled in some dots. Because remember at the time we were like, did he have to declare for it? How does that work? No, they just said, "Hey, this is happening," and he was like, "Cool." So
I think he said that he got out of the shower after the workout, got a phone call. It's like, "You've been drafted." And he's like, "The draft's not for 2 months." Yeah. What are you talking about?
Yeah, you've been drafted. He was like, "The draft is in April." Yeah. Also, Deshaun White, he was very honest and candid about the lack of a combine invite. Really stuck in his craw. You could tell. He didn't try to play it off of like, whatever. He was like, what did he say, Ryan? He said something along the lines of like, that'll stick with me for a while, or like the rest of my career or something, that he didn't get.
Yeah. He had said that it'll stick with him the rest of his career, but also that it'll fuel him through this off season, through all these workouts and things like that. Because he had to do the initial, it took him a little bit to get over it. I think he said he had to remove some of the entitlement of thinking he was going to go to the combine. And then it flipped to, instead of being disappointed, I'm going to use it as a motivator. You can kind of tell. And so, and I wonder if that played into him being a little nervous for that first 40, because he had said that he's a guy that nerves is not something he's usually had to deal with. He's not one of those nervous guys right before a game or something like that. And so that was kind of a little bit, he had said it took him by surprise, but he was able to work out of it quickly, which I think just shows the caliber of athlete that he is, that he can acknowledge something's a little different. And it just took one quick, conversation with Key Lawrence and a few of the other guys back there to be fine the rest of the day.
And that concludes our pro day coverage. We'll see what happens with the draft here coming up in later this month. It's the weekend after the spring game. So we'll have spring coverage wrap up, and then we'll turn our attention to where these guys all end up and how highly they get drafted and what their team is and all that good stuff coming up later this month. All right, we're going to take another timeout here. We'll come back. Final segment. We'll hit some other sports here. Another player to the portal for OU Hoops, and it's a doozy. We'll talk about that next, as well as wrapping up the weekends that were for the Diamond Sports next here, right here on the AllSooners Podcast. Final segment of the AllSooners Podcast, episode 181. Hit some other sports here on the way out. Send you on your way into the rest of your week. When we do Tuesdays, I can't really say weekend. Tuesday is too far away. So rest of your week, I'll have to say here as another Tuesday pod for us. Here,
by the time I get this uploaded to YouTube, it will be the weekend.
It takes several hours to get the video versions up. So shout out him for grinding to get the videos up. I don't know. Why does it take so long? Do you have a theory?
I don't know. I cleared off my hard drive. It's like half full now. And so that's not it. That used to be it, but that's not it now. I don't know. Something about my hard drive needs to be like repurposed or reconfigured or parsed or so, whatever the terminology is that computer people use. I need to basically clean my hard drive up, I think. And I might try that today before I start uploading.
Well, what you guys don't know is that on days we record the podcast, Hoove tries to start turning the video around and gets that thing exported. It really ties him down on the laptop front. So that typewriter over his left shoulder is actually what he writes all of his copy on, usually on Wednesdays, as he has to pull that down off the shelf and he starts writing all of his copy and then pops it in later. So that's the real magic that you're missing when Hoove is doing the Lord's work to turn around this video for our YouTube audience.
That's actually like a 1954 model Underwood. Funny story behind that. My wife's grandfather won it on The Price is Right in like 1955.
Nice.
What?
That's amazing.
Yeah, that was the prize that he won on The Price is Right. So we inherited that, and it went into my stash, of course, because I'm the writer.
Nice. My only typewriter story I have is I went to tour the Indianapolis Motor Speedway when you sent me to cover the the COVID NCAA tournament.
Yep.
And they took us up. Our tour guide knew I was a writer, so he took me up to like the writer's perch, and he's like, "So this is the same perch that was here back in the day, and writers used to have to bring a brick with them because they would have to have their typewriter. They'd carry their typewriter in a suitcase and the brick, and then once they were done with copy, they'd have to set it down and put the brick on top of it, so that every time the cars flew by, all of their copy didn't just fly below to the
oh my God.
to the audience below." And I was like, "Dear God, thank you for computers, thank you for laptops. That sounds like a disaster."
Yeah, that's awesome.
No, thank you on all of it. No, thank you. I'll stick with computer. I typo too much for that. You have to be mentally just sweating about every decision you make on the keyboard with when you're doing a typewriter. All right, other sports here. Last night was the national championship game for college basketball. One shining moment. Amazing. Just so good. So good. The NCAA tournament is just sports perfection. UConn won the title last night. Jim Nantz made me cry a little because he said goodbye, and that was very, very sad. Before, though, that we got to the actual end of the season, had another player hit the portal for Oklahoma. Per reports, he hasn't announced it officially yet, but obviously reliable places have reported it, that Jalen Hill is looking for a new place to play next year. This is the fifth guy to hit the portal, and if you watch the show, listen to the show regularly, you know that I've kind of downplayed everybody that OU's lost so far. I mean, they've all been bench players. Like I said, the four guys who had transferred before, one total start in Big 12 play of those four guys: Joe Bamisile, Bijan Cortez, C.J. Noland, and Benny Schroeder. You will not hear me do that here. This is a disastrous loss for Oklahoma, in my opinion. Jalen Hill, OU veteran, was their best player last year. Him and Porter Moser are close. He loves OU. He actually cares about OU. He's an OU guy out of high school. Just somebody you can't lose. And hits the portal. This is a tough one for Oklahoma. This is bad, in my opinion. What do you guys think?
I agree. It's bad. We talked about it yesterday while we were waiting for football practice to get over. If you can't keep Jalen Hill
right
from transferring, who can you keep? I mean, he was Mr. OU. He was the guy that was into the program. He'd been here a long time. He'd played for Lon Kruger. He'd played for Porter Moser. If you can't keep him, who can you keep? We know the infamous nickname by now, Portal Moser. He's going to have to dive in again. He's going to have to
the other way. The Portal Moser nicknames are coming the other way. Everybody leaves.
Exactly. That's a good point. But Jalen Hill, tell me you guys didn't think that he was capable of a lot more this year. 9.7 points, 5.8 rebounds per game. Porter talked a lot about his defense, how I don't know if he switched his mentality to more of a defensive stopper, but I don't know. I was expecting 14, 15 points a game out of him this year, and he was under 10. So big loss. Don't get me wrong. Big loss because he's one of those guys that, hey, Porter Moser says over and over, we're trying to build a culture. We're trying to establish a culture. We're trying to lay a foundation. There goes a foundational guy. He's gone, or he wants to be gone. He hasn't officially left yet, but if he leaves through the portal, as all indications are, that hurts.
Yeah, and he's a guy, too, that you remember the first couple of Big 12 games, it was like Sherfield and Hill were the scorers. You were like, okay, if they could just get a third guy online, they might be able to figure something out. And then as the Big 12 slate wore on, Jalen Hill kind of came back down a little bit. He popped up again, had that huge performance against Alabama. But the thing that's going to hurt on this one, too, is so yesterday we saw C.J. Noland exit the portal. Where is he going? St. Louis. So, right, that's a conversation we had a lot this offseason with football, right? Of, okay, but if you're losing guys to Texas State, stuff like that, are you actually getting better by freeing that roster spot up to bring in someone that is a Power 5 player? What I've been told, the early interest on Jalen Hill is about half of the Big 12 conference is in on it. And that tells you that's why this is a big, he is a guy that can fit into teams that are good, right? Is it more of a, hey, you're the fifth starter, you're here to be the defensive stopper to give us some athleticism, rebound, and if you score a little bit, cool? Maybe. Maybe he's better on a lesser offensive role on a better team. But if you lose him in conference, that's a disaster. You have a conversation about Grant Sherfield. I don't expect him to come back. If Jacob Groves, if that's another guy that saw his playing time cut into, if he decides not to come back, you're not replacing half the roster. You're going 75% of the roster in the portal or freshmen coming out. That's the second year in a row you've lost a ton of people. And then because of that, then someone like me looks to the fact that KT Turner stayed on staff exactly 1 year. David Patrick stayed on staff exactly 1 year and then took the Sacramento State head coaching job. That's not like he's a glamorous, you know what I mean? You lost Brady, the assistant, before the season even started. It seems like a trend that people would rather leave Norman than stay and build, which can't be the trend if you're selling yourself as a guy that you want a team that wants to grow old together, all that crap, which Porter struggled with the transfer portal leaving. And I think that's going to become a very real storyline. I think those are questions Porter's going to have to answer, because this isn't just took the job, no one's on the roster, you got to take everybody in. It is what it is. You are now having guys that have worked with you for a year, or guys that have worked with you for 2 years leave.
Yeah, this is a time for self-reflection for Porter to look within himself, look at the man in the mirror, and say, "What? Okay, maybe it's not all of them. Maybe it's me." And I'm not casting aspersions or saying he's doing anything wrong. I'm just saying he needs to look at the way he's running his operation and saying, "Why are all these guys leaving, coaches and players?" I see this Jalen Hill leaving as a potential. If he gets in the right place, he'll have some opportunities, but potential. Remember Brady Manick goes to North Carolina, and we're all like, the heck is Brady Manick going to North Carolina for? So he can go to the freaking Final Four. That's what he's going to North Carolina for.
Play a big
Has
role.
the potential to do that if he lands in the right spot.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, with everything you guys said, I mean, like Ryan said, if he ends up in the Big 12, coming to Lloyd Noble next year, and like that's rough. And like I said, the four guys before, it really didn't, not trying to even spin zone, I really didn't bother me for Oklahoma. You need open spots. Those guys weren't big impact players, but Jalen Hill is a guy that you hope to have back as your veteran leader, a starter, certainly, obviously, great on defense, captain type of guy, very mature. Major ouch, because those two guys felt close. Porter talked all the time how much he loved Jalen Hill for 2 full years. Basically, he talked about how much he loved Jalen Hill, and he leaves anyway. Rough. And all indications are Jacob Groves is going to leave too. And if that happens, Grant Sherfield, why on earth would he come back? Why would he stay? And so at that point, you basically have no players. I mean, you just don't have a team. You have Uzan and Owa and Godwin are the only guys back. Outside of Northweather and Yaya Kita, guys who we never saw last year. Rough.
Did you take Sherfield accepting all those like all-star invites and the 3-point contest invite for Final Four weekend as like I'm trying to show myself off for some sort of pro aspirations? Because that's how I took that.
I guess. Yeah, it was kind of strange. I didn't know. It doesn't seem like guys who come back usually do those things.
Right.
I mean, I think at least. I don't know.
It'll be interesting to track. You're not going to win a ton of games in this conference with 2 sophomores and 2 freshmen and Sam Godwin as your starting 5. And that would be the starting 5 next year of current guys signed or on the roster.
Most simply put, Oklahoma is just not in a position to have this much turnover and expect to do anything. And I know it can happen. Kansas State had a lot of turnover last year going into Tang's first year, and look what they just did. So it's not impossible, but yeah, it's very, very, very slim right now for Oklahoma. I don't know what they're going to do. They feel like they're in a really rough spot right now.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but most of Porter's success at Loyola was because of older teams, established teams, seniors, guys like that. He hasn't even begun to have that opportunity at Oklahoma yet.
Yeah, he hasn't been able to have that opportunity, and the records weren't great at Loyola. It wasn't like he was churning out 30 wins a year, whether it was young or old, and the Final Four run only came when the team was older. Like, it was a true growth process, peak, and then obviously he took that success at Loyola and was able to make another tournament run pretty much immediately turn around, right? But there's no, like, the trend at Oklahoma is worse.
You're like 95% dead right now, and you go to 100% if you lose Milo Suzan or Ortega-Owa. But if Milo Sue's on portal sometime in the near future, don't even play next year. Just take a year to not even have a program and completely reset, because it is over if you lose Milo Sue's on. So that's where attention turns now as they move forward. Rough right now for that team. On a much more positive note, softball swept Texas. They did what we all thought they would do. When they play good teams, they're only ever really in danger of losing when they just overlook somebody. If they're dialed in, they're not going to lose. That just doesn't happen. They swept over the Texas over the weekend. Ryan, you were at all the games. This is your account. Lean on you as per usual. You can bring up the Mike White stuff whenever you want. However you want to interweave that into the mix here. But they do what they do. They swept. They came close to losing on Saturday. They were trailing in the 7th, but didn't matter, as per usual. Didn't matter. And keep on keeping on. They keep doing their thing.
Yeah, for just 3 games, there is so much to get into. First off, Oklahoma mission accomplished. They set the new regular season attendance record on Friday at Hall of Fame. I think it was 89.70, ended up being 89.72, I think was the official attendance that was announced. So that check mark, it was a World Series-esque atmosphere, especially added. I think all Mike White did with his comments was, if you missed them, it was about an 8-second moment out of a 2-minute clip that was a very typical weekend preview where Mike White was asked about Oklahoma reloading, and he said, reload. Yeah, they keep reloading. Well, I'm not sure it's all above. Never mind. I'm not going to talk about it. Basically insinuating that the way that Oklahoma adds players is not above board. I think all that really did was kick the hornet's nest, because once the fans got into Hall of Fame Stadium, it was Mike White, public enemy number 1. He will be booed to and from the circle every time he makes a decision. I think it just added to kind of that. It made it sound like a World Series game, even though they were missing kind of the stands in the outfield. And Oklahoma just put on a show for the fans. They did that on Friday and Sunday, despite falling down 1-0 to all of it. After the game, Mike White attempted to clarify his comments. He said it was taken out of context. He's like, he point blank asked us, did I call Patty Gasso a cheater? No. Maybe insinuated it, but I didn't say those words. And then he made the case that Texas is a have-not in the NIL space, and Oklahoma is a have when it comes to softball. So I'm sure that Chris Del Conte, the Texas AD, is somehow more upset with Mike White after that than it was beforehand. And I think that kind of spilled over into Saturday, because Oklahoma, it was the quick turnaround. That's what we kind of talked about. Like the quick turnaround, that's what I wanted to see, how they're going to handle that. Texas pitcher Mac Morgan did a really good job. OU looked flat, frankly, for about 5 innings of that. Here's the thing. You need 1 inning if you're Oklahoma in most of those games. And they came out, Jada Coleman with the clutch 2-run shot in the 7th inning. Then it was just like this is happening. It's just, is it going to happen in the 7th or the 8th? Kinsey Hansen's the one that finished that off. Then Tiare Jennings just went bananas again on Sunday. 4 for 4, bunch of RBI. She was named the NFCA National Player of the Week. That's the first honor of that for Oklahoma this year. This is the second time in her career. The last time she won it was the very first weekend she played college softball, when Oklahoma just absolutely battered UTEP. And other than that, it was like Jocelyn Allo who won that bad boy 3 times last year. So a really, really dominant weekend, and Oklahoma navigated the drama and the emotion. Patty Gasso took the high road on Friday. She quite literally said, I'm going to take the high road. When I look in the mirror, I know what we are here. I asked her on Sunday. I circled back. I was like, hey, in her opening statement on Sunday, she led with Texas is a really tough team, tough to sweep. So the very last question, I was like, look, you said Texas is a tough team to sweep. You're very happy about it, but considering all of the whatever this last week was, this one any sweeter? Patty Gasso declined to address that. She said she was just happy to move to 6-0 in Big 12 play, but the smile from Patty Gasso and the smile from Tiare Jennings, that series meant a lot to the program.
Okay, Ryan, you did a good job there expressing all the exactly what happened. Now I'm going to dive in.
Have at Mr. White.
Have we ever seen anything like this before at such a high level of American sport? where this is like this would be like the CEO at Samsung going after the CEO of Apple and then backtracking, right? And saying, I mean, these are high level head coach, $1 million coaches, right? These are people who are paid a lot of money to coach softball, but also be the face of the program and be show a little class and integrity. And like Patty was talking to High Road, not one of these when your head coach flips off the entire crowd and the referees and everything else at the Big 12 tournament. What we saw from Mike White, the Texas coach, was, this is my estimation, the single most incompetent handling of any something as innocent as a video where he started making a statement and then backtracked and declined and stopped. He comes out Friday and absolutely throws dirt on his own campaign. Like, what are you talking about? How is Texas a have-not? Well, we've got 22 sports we have to, and they only have 3. What? 22-3? Oh, so Oklahoma doesn't have any other sports. Just completely asinine. Starts to throw his video guy, who is the local ABC affiliate in Austin, his video guy, starts to throw him under the bus. Like, deflect. Unbelievably incompetent the way he handled that. If I'm the athletic director in Texas, if I'm Chris Del Conte, I'm calling him on the carpet and I am saying, don't you ever suggest that we don't have NIL. Don't you ever suggest that we're a have-not. You will be walking if you do that again. It's just unbelievable. The high-level CEO type $1 million program in charge, face of the program, and that's the way you go? Unbelievable.
I just don't understand. So where he's going, first off, if he's in a heads-up recruiting battle with Oklahoma, you know what all Patty Gasso has to do? These are 2 minutes of Mike White's own words where he basically says Oklahoma's the standard. They are not appreciated for how elite their defense is. They are what everyone's chasing in the sports. They are the have. We are the have-nots. Patty Gasso works hard at NIL. So if you're Patty Gasso, you're like, okay, like you've heard my pitch. That's Mike White's pitch. Mike White's pitch is to come here because we've got it sorted and they can't figure it out. A&M, who we know is very active in NIL, they were aggressive on the coaching scene. They're up and coming a little bit. They took 1 of 2 off a really good Tennessee team this last weekend. Everyone in the SEC is going, yes, Mike White. Yes, Mike White. Keep saying dumb crap like that. We're going to recruit off of this. So that's incredible. He reminds me of he's a good talker as far as like he's engaging. And while he has these moments, like in the press conference, I'm like, that's not a guy that would probably flip off an umpire against Oklahoma State at the Big 12. Like he's a pretty engaging guy. But he has the same press conference sense as Tom Herman, which is sticking his foot in his mouth over and over and over again. He's just like a more talented communicator as far as like actual putting words together, as opposed to having like a really long pause when asked if he has any all Big 12 caliber players, then saying some. Like it's that energy. It's Tom Herman energy, but he talks a lot more.
The thing about did I call her a cheater? You saw the video. Did I call her a cheater anywhere in there? Insinuated it, maybe. Whatever. Dude.
So dumb to say that.
That's the single dumbest thing I've ever heard a coach say in a press conference. You're from down under, right? You're from Australia, right? They speak English in Australia. That's the native language. What the hell language are you speaking where you think, I didn't call her a cheater, I just insinuated a cheater? Where you think that's 2 different things. What is wrong with you? Unbelievable.
He's box office. I hope that somehow, some way, what would it take? I guess it would take Baylor beating Texas and finishing 3rd so that Oklahoma, Texas is the semifinal to get us to a Bedlam Big 12 championship. Sign me up.
Yeah. Also, Patty's comment on Friday was perfect, was it not? Where she said, I'm not surprised, but I take the high road. I don't have to answer to anybody. I just got to look in the mirror, and I'm very comfortable when I do that. That was a great quote. Perfect response. Like, I'm not getting into that. This is mud wrestling. He wants to mud wrestle. I'm not going to mud wrestle.
Yeah, mud wrestling just gets her rings dirty. Is kind of
Yeah, I love Mike White. I hope he coaches there forever. He's so perfect for Texas. He's the perfect heel
Yeah, he is.
To Patty's very nice motherly kind of attitude. They're total opposites, and it's great. I'm glad that Texas is coming to the SEC with OU for that to keep that going, because he's perfect. He's like Tom Herman. He's like Chris Beard. He's Texas. He fits right into that. I know both those previous two guys I just mentioned aren't there anymore, but he fits the mold. He's great. I love him. He's going to keep providing content for us for a long time, I think. So they
By the
dominate.
way, I said Australia. I made the Stephen Adams mistake. He's from New Zealand. He's not from Australia. He could come across and punch me in the face right now for saying he's from Australia, and I would take it because you don't make that mistake. So my bad.
Stephen Adams wouldn't like that. Josh Giddey be okay with it, but not Stephen Adams.
Yeah, he's Nicole Mendez makes fun of me when we do radio stuff, but I'm just like, Nicole, I know that you play, and so that annoys you. For us, Mike White's everything you could dream of he's incredible. He's incredible. So,
yeah,
Mike White press conferences make me happy. He's electric.
Coach there
just
forever.
Keep them coming. Just don't stop. Just whatever you got in the front of your brain, just let it out. Let it roll right off your tongue, because it's unbelievably entertaining.
It's amazing. It's amazing. Keep it going, please. All right. Wrapping up with a little bit of baseball here. Weird weekend for them. They, like we said last week, they had Stanford coming to town. First top 10 team to come to Norman in the non-conference in over a decade. So a really long time. And they split with them, which I think before the week started, after the rough weekend in Manhattan the weekend before, I think almost anyone affiliated with that team, fan, player, whatever, probably would have been okay with a split. I mean, just the way how good Stanford is, so good. Been to Omaha the last 2 years, primed to make another run at it again this year. That's a really, really good program. And they did split, but the way the split happened is a little unusual, because the run differential is like minus 20 or whatever it is, because on Thursday and on Sunday, Oklahoma got run out of the ballpark in grand fashion. But they won the middle 2 games, and that's how it counts. It goes down as 2 wins, 2 losses. It doesn't really matter the margins. It feels weird, but it doesn't really matter the margins. So they split the weekend overall. I don't know. We'll see where they go from here. They had bright spots from just about everything this weekend. They had games where the offense was great, games where the bullpen was fantastic, games where the starting pitching was fantastic, and games where all 3 of those things were not fantastic. So I don't know. They're in kind of a weird spot right now. Kind of see where they go from here. But I think overall, a split, you're okay with it, because, like I said, Stanford is really, really good. And we'll see if they can build on it and where they go from here.
Josh, they played well in the wins, didn't they? They got big hits, timely hits, good pitching. So that's encouraging.
Saturday was the best win of the year. That was a very back and forth game.
Yeah, Kendall hits gets
home run. Yeah,
the 7th inning. Yeah, so that's encouraging for sure. But so again, you look back at last year, you know what they're capable of. You see what on the field, what this team's potential is. But then those other 2 games, what'd you say? The run differential was minus 23, I think.
They lost the first game by 12, yeah, and then the Sunday game by 11. So 23 in just those 2, yeah.
Man, I don't know. Long way to go for this team. Long way, and that's what Skip said. That was one of his comments. There's still, there's a long way to go in this season. So he's encouraged by the good stuff.
Do you, at this point in the season, do you get the vibe that he's more encouraged, that like aspects of the game have shown that they can be positive? Like the offense has shown at times it can be really good. The pitching has shown at times, and it just hasn't been put all together? Or is he more frustrated that you've shown what you can do, but no one seems to be able to really find that consistency to let them motor through? Like, it feels like the TCU series is really the TCU series in that weekend down. Was it in Frisco that they?
Yeah, the Frisco weekend they won 2 there. Yeah, I think Skip overall is always kind of an optimistic. This kind of the way he kind of approaches it. I think the thing that is the most encouraging right now for Oklahoma is that the players they've stayed optimistic. They've stayed positive through the rough stretch there. And obviously, and he talked about it after the game on Friday. I was talking to Skip, and he was talking about how the day before they were getting their brains beat in. That's how Skip classified it, in a way that only he can, on Thursday. And he said, even though that was going on, everybody was still up on the dugout, still encouraging each other, still rooting, still fighting, even though they're down by 1,000,000 runs, still battling. They came back on Friday ready to go at it again. Didn't and they won on Friday. Obviously, and Braxton Douthit was fantastic in that game. So I think that's the encouraging part. But you're going to have to find a little more consistency, and this is a big week here. Oral Roberts tonight in Tulsa. They're good. Oral Roberts is good. They're 20-9 this year, and they're undefeated in conference so far. Still early, but undefeated in conference. That's a tough game, and they got to go to Waco this week. Big 12 is very unforgiving. The schedule for this team right now is kind of similar to basketball. We joked about in basketball how there's no easy games anywhere in the Big 12, and then OU finally steps out of Big 12 play and has to play Alabama. That's kind of what baseball is doing, because there's no easy weekends, and they step out and they play Stanford, who is a top 10 team, and then later they step out again. They play Gonzaga, who's a perennial tournament team as well. So there's not any easy weekends. Any weekend that you can win the series is a good weekend. So finding a way to just scratch across wins, and we'll see where they go. They're a weird team. They're a weird team. They are. They've had high highs and some low lows, and we'll see where they go from here. But I don't know. You take the split, I guess. That's how you feel right now. We'll reevaluate. It's a week-to-week feel right now with that team. All right. Any last things? Gymnastics in the championships?
Yeah, they're in the championship semifinals next weekend. So then they advance in that, and they'll be in the 4 on the floor, which is almost as cool a nickname as the Final Four. It's actually a cooler nickname, I think, than the Final Four. The 4 teams left on the floor. The 4 on the floor.
I got to give it. That is really good, but the Frozen 4.
Frozen 4 is the best.
That's so good.
Yeah,
so good.
Yeah, hard to top that. We need to backdoor OU hockey into out of club level and into where they can compete to make it to the Frozen 4.
The Frozen 4. It's always like Minnesota, Duluth, and like all these. It's like only like 3 states that have hockey good enough to like get that far. It's like Wisconsin, Michigan, and Minnesota. They just dominate.
Yeah, I don't know anything about hockey, like the rules and stuff, but happy to learn it to go for the Frozen 4.
How do I shoot hockey? That sounds impossible. I don't know if I want to even begin.
Have you seen? There's like holes in the glass for like still photographers. You have to like you pull the plexiglass back and you shoot, and then when they like get near you on the boards, you have to like pull your camera out and like cover it up so that there's not like a hole in the board. It's insane.
That's horrifying. No thanks.
I spend a lot of time on TikTok watching hockey photographers that like post videos of them just like shooting the game. I'm just like, this is an insane proposition.
Yeah, no thank you. The football guys and basketball guys almost running me over once a game is enough action for me. I don't need that. All right, I think that's it for us. We'll be back next week, wrapping up the latest from spring camp, of course, and getting ever so closer to the spring game coming up later on this month. And of course, we'll wrap up all the latest with the Diamond Sports. I'm sure somebody else will hit the portal for hoops before next week's show, so we'll talk about that as well. All that good stuff will be back right here on the AllSooners Podcast. You can listen to the shows on iTunes, Spotify, Google, iHeart, wherever you get your podcast. If you have an Amazon-enabled device, just say, Alexa, play the AllSooners Podcast. Also posted on our website, allsooners.com. Click on the player list on your phone, your tablet, or your computer. And, of course, you can watch the shows as well on whose YouTube page, John Hoover Media. Make sure to like, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff over there. That's it. We'll be back next week. For Ryan Chapman and John Hoover, I'm Josh Callaway. We'll catch you guys next time.